So, Blenderheads, today might be the first and last time we talk about a jazz record. Let's find out. Today we're talking about Lee Morgan's Volume 3. Came out in 1957 on Blue Note Records. Cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Cheers, gentlemen.
This album's older than my mom.
I've always liked jazz. Picked it up in movies, and obviously as a kid I was interested in Miles Davis, John Coltrane and stuff. Lee Morgan was the first artist I found that nobody told me about. And Volume 3 isn't the first thing I ever listened to, but I've kind of heard people talk about it, so I wanted to bring it up and bring it up to you guys.
So you kind of discovered this on your own?
Yeah.
How'd you happen upon it? Spotify.
So I didn't really find it on my own.
Hold on, did this come up in your suggested stuff or?
Yeah, well, okay, so Horace Silver is somebody that people talk about.
Right.
I just found him through other artists, and it's okay, so we're about to talk about a Lee Morgan album, right?
Yeah.
But really, we have to talk about almost everybody in this album, just like every other jazz record. That's what's so cool about the jazz records to me was the art was really cool, especially Blue Note. The art was really cool. The liner notes had the story of why, even old country records and stuff. And there was a background to it. There was different artists coming in and out of it, and I just love that. I love to be able to read everything that was going on.
Do you have this on vinyl?
I do not, but I do have it on CD. And a lot of my jazz I actually get, CD wise. Sometimes vinyl doesn't have all the information liner notes that say a CD had.
Interesting.
Because when you were younger, as you remember, booklets were they were booklets.
Exactly. They're 2 pages.
Now vinyl is everything's compressed into one sheet, and that's why when a band actually does it right, with a reissue and stuff, which you should, if you're reissuing something, give the fans something.
On the packaging.
Yeah,
and
come on, fuckers, we're paying for it. I always respected that, but with jazz, like I said, I like reading and finding out, different artists that way.
Right, because lots of people played on this.
Exactly.
I've been a jazz fan my whole life. My family listened to jazz, Glenn Miller, Dave Brubeck, Diana Krall, and then later on, after I had started playing drums and stuff, you hear about Dave Weckl and drummers like that. Snarky Puppy, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, which you fucking hated that video that we played.
Yeah, that shit sucks. Maybe if I didn't see them.
But I think that makes it better.
Oh.
But when you picked Lee Morgan, I was surprised I didn't know who it was. I'm not way into jazz. I like to listen to it. It's always been a genre I've been way into, but I'm not familiar with Lee Morgan at all.
Yeah.
Casey, what's your jazz intake like?
So my jazz intake is, I've always been jazz curious, but I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm a jazz fan. I think the closest I come to jazz is Trioscapes, Dan Briggs' jazz fusion kind of thing.
It's not even close.
But I get what you're...
I always felt like jazz is a mood music for me.
Background music?
No, not necessarily background, but there's a certain situation you have to be in to listen
What
to
is
it.
that situation?
So jazz was not on my radar at all. And my wife and I went to New Orleans and
Hell yeah. Dixieland.
I don't remember what year it was, and we went for the Voodoo Festival. And we were walking down Bourbon, and there was a jazz band playing, and we stopped in the bar. They had the doors open. We heard it. We walked in, and in the moment, not being a fan of jazz, it was all encompassing. It enveloped the whole
the room even. Yeah.
And it was this very to me, it felt like this very impromptu, not necessarily rehearsed, almost like you're watching a band rehearse more than you're actually watching a band play a set.
It's so
You're,
cool.
you're watching musicians have fun.
Exactly. And so to me, listening to this kind of took that whole like persona away from like the mystique away from the jazz music, because it was recorded and it didn't have that energy. And so to me, I've always associated jazz with kind of an impromptu like jam session.
It's very jazz to be improv, yeah.
So to like listen to it recorded, it was a whole different experience for me. It took a really long time to like kind of get into this.
Mm-hmm.
Did you enjoy this album though? Did you like, even though it's not live and like not an experience, like a recording of it from 1957?
So the first 250 times I listened to this, I didn't like it. I won't go as far to say I didn't like it. I didn't get it. It was too smart for me. It didn't scratch that itch. It left me.
It doesn't like put you in the room.
It doesn't. So what was it? So we've been sitting on this for a while.
Yeah.
We've been listening to this one for a minute, yeah.
Which is good thing.
And quite frankly, I love when we do these longer like marinade with the music we've suggested. So we started this album when it was still cold outside.
It's not cold outside.
It's not cold outside anymore. But the point I'm trying to make is we started this album when it was cold, and we had some crazy temperature changes where like it was cold one day, it was hot the next day, and then like 2 days later it was beach cool.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And I was driving around, I cracked my windows down because it was hot in the car, but not cold or not hot enough to run the air conditioner. And this album clicked.
Wow.
And I was like, holy shit, I fucking get it.
Can I say something real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
The same exact thing happened to me where I'd be like going to work and I'd have it in and I would have I'd have my windows down at some points and like just having my coffee, and this fucking loud.
Yeah.
Because you're driving and my windows are like all the way down, and it's great. It's a good morning for me.
This
it's a
album
morning listen.
Doesn't fit the rat race of life, but it fits the slow down, and whatever happens. There's this vibe to this album. And once it fucking clicked, I started noticing all these little nuances in this album. Like the fact that there's some fucking trumpet parts where the microphone just can't handle the peaks of this trumpet.
Yeah,
and it
it's
just
so
distorts.
cool, yeah.
And like the drums, like a little bit of off timing here and there, almost like it was played live. And that live fucking feeling that I got when I was in New Orleans kind of hit. And I was amazed by it.
That's why I was asking that. Like because to me, you can hear that it's clearly live, right? Most of the shit, if not all of it, it's recorded live.
And it probably is. I don't know if it is.
I would say, yeah.
I didn't look into it.
There might be like
there's no tracking. It's all reel to reel.
There's like one mic in the room or whatever, or a handful of mics,
maybe
4 or something. You know what I mean?
They're all playing. So yeah, the drumming on this, you bring it up. It's maybe a little off timing or whatever. But what's really cool about this album is that it's kind of the start of this drummer's like career playing with more and more people. He was a little more unknown.
Okay.
His name escapes me right now, but also like Lee Morgan's like a teenager, I believe, when they recorded this.
Way young.
Yeah.
That's so fucking rad,
dude. Yeah, it's like a staple in time. Like. I remember Clifford. I didn't know that Clifford Brown had died not even a year prior before that, and that's who that song is for. I had no idea. So, I'm so glad that I actually picked this because I got more into... And that's what I love about jazz. The history of it, the players of it, Dude, this is... Yeah.
It's a very cool genre. I get into it. I think the drummer's playing is pretty solid. Like, it's not sloppy, it's swingy.
Yeah, no, I'm not at all saying that it's sloppy. There's just these little nuances that you catch that make it feel live.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely live because he's like doing accents, but the accents like land differently every time. I love it, dude.
And the rhythm section on this whole album is amazing through the whole thing. Like that's like the thing that peaked for me was the whole rhythm section with the fucking walking bass back and forth and the little fucking brushes and stuff.
The brushes are great.
I believe which were actually musicians that played with Miles Davis and John Coltrane. group that they would usually play with.
Okay,
so
okay.
that's who's also playing on this. So
I like
makes
that
sense.
it's fucking kind of fast.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Some jazz is like slower. Like I like Diana Krall, and some of her stuff can kind of tend to be a little more slower and moodier. This is like it feels like sweaty.
Okay.
Like it's hot. You know what I mean? And like shit's kind of cooking the whole time.
Yeah.
And things are happening. It's pretty fucking good, dude. You said so when you picked this. One of the things you said that really resonated to me is like we all love jazz, but we don't talk about jazz.
No, I think it's not necessarily that we all love jazz. I think it's that we all love the idea of jazz, but we're all
jazz.
not smart enough to understand jazz.
Well, me
That's
personally,
That's true. Yeah.
I do like jazz. I've
Yeah.
always kind of liked jazz, and like I'm like trying to think about like when I started liking jazz. Like where did that come from? You know, and I think it actually might have been my mom.
Okay.
I think my mom like kind of like was playing something one time. I don't think she even knew who they were, but my mom was like listening to it, and I just remember being like, "Oh, I really like this. You know, this is cool."
Yeah.
And so, anyways, I'm not like the biggest jazz fan, but some of us are that enjoy jazz aren't knowledgeable in it because we don't talk about it. We don't learn about it from each other. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like you mentioned a couple artists that I actually had never heard of. You know what I mean?
Well, and there's a standard that we as metal fans kind of like. There's a structure that you understand, and jazz doesn't follow that structure. So it's really hard for us to understand something like that, and that's my issue with this. Is like I feel like as good as this is, I still don't understand it.
I agree 100%. There's like a vibe to it and like a culture to it that I'm not a part of directly.
Yeah.
I have a deep appreciation for it, but I'm not in it.
Yeah.
Like I'm a metalhead. Through and through,
Well, and
right?
that's the thing. So we could talk about
We've been in metal bands.
Well, we could talk about like double time and blast beats and power chords and things like that and the structures of that. But I have no clue when it comes to like 9/10 timing or whatever they use these.
Do you think this is like too like music nerdy? Like, you know what I mean? Like too like
So I'll say this. At many points of listening to this album, I wish there was vocals in it. But at the same time, I'm like, adding vocals to jazz, doesn't that just make it blues?
No, there's jazz singers. Chet Baker.
I see, and that's the thing.
I'm a big Diana Krall fan.
I'm not familiar enough with jazz to understand it.
Yeah.
The jazz bands when we were in, or the band that we watched, I don't even know who it was when we walked into that bar in Louisiana or in New Orleans.
It's a house band, dude.
Yeah.
It was whatever. It might have been a house band.
I saw one on a steamboat and it was great.
The two or three
Dixieland
songs,
band,
the two or three
jazz.
songs we watched, they didn't sing on. And as we were walking out, a singer came up and was singing, and it was I want to say it was a female singer. I don't remember.
Yeah, all loungy and shit.
Yeah, and I was like,
great,
oh,
dude, love
this
it.
is great. But we were like, well, let's go get more drunk.
Do you get emotion out of this though? Do you feel like there's like emotion being conveyed?
I feel like there's emotion being conveyed. I don't think I understand the emotion. You could feel the undertones of like there's this rawness kind of being pushed out of it, but I don't know where they're going. So I think that's my thing.
I kind of agree.
Being a lyrics guy, I rely on a lot of like vocal pattern and like vocal fray and things like that to understand the emotion they're trying to get across, and I don't get that from this.
I think we're also sorry.
Oh no, there's just some tempo shifts in this that portray that they're trying to get there to me, but I'm not versed enough in this style of music to understand what they're trying to get across.
Or even if that's like the goal.
Yeah.
And it might not be, right?
It might not be.
I think also we got to remember that this was recorded in 1957.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're like, oh,
It's
there's
ago.
this and that, you know what I mean? I mean, this is entertainment, man.
Yeah, doo-wop was the popular music back then.
Well, this is like a debop, I guess, like style of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, actually, this was like
hard bop.
Yeah, like it was like a different change. It was like the next generation of jazz players that were a part of this. Like Charles Mingus is a part of this. Horace Silver I brought up and stuff. Hank Mobley. And so I guess and that's why I wanted to pick it too, is because I didn't know how much about jazz you guys knew or whatnot. You know, it's like testing
nothing.
and that's what can make you into like Dark Throne. Like it can make for a good conversation.
And I totally get where you're coming from. So after listening to this, there's influence in here that I didn't understand at the time that came from jazz. So like we all voted Imperial Triumphant on the last season as one of our top albums. And we all stated, oh yeah, it's jazz influence, but I didn't understand what I meant at the time. I was like, oh yeah, it's jazz because they had trumpets and shit. But going back and listening to this, I understand that like, oh, the time signatures and the improv.
The light just went bing.
Yeah.
Casey
awesome,
got
dude.
it. Yeah, that is like honestly cool and honest,
like
and awesome.
And these little nuances, and even in like gent bands and progressive hardcore and stuff, there's these little nuances that were picked up. And I don't know necessarily if they were picked up from this band specifically, but they were picked up from this genre of music and this progression of it. And it makes it like that much cooler to go back and listen to something that you might not necessarily love or like or even understand, but the fact that you could listen to it and pick up on little nuances in the music that you like that was influenced. I mean, there's shit that we listen to now that we're like, oh, it was influenced by Metallica, or it was influenced by Rush, or it was influenced by Guns N' Roses.
Of music.
But they were influenced by the previous generation, was influenced by the previous generation. And to go back this far and listen to something and be like, oh, it's cool that this was influenced by this.
It's like, I don't want to say this because it sounds stupid, you know? But to me, like, this is rock and roll. Like, these guys are, like, playing in clubs, getting drunk, dancing, having a good-ass time. You know, that's rock and roll.
It is kind of rock.
But I don't want to... That's just how I would describe it to somebody, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, I don't want to put rock and roll on this, you know what I mean?
Well, but
the vibe, the attitude,
it was exactly,
punk.
it was the attitude.
I have a prediction that we're going to do more jazz, and it's going to be something we get
concur,
into.
100%.
I
as
agree.
the show Blenderstyle. Count on more jazz because I got tons of picks, bro.
That's cool. And also, if you guys have picks, please send them our way. I mean, we're definitely open to
leave them in the comments. Hit us up on social media.
As long as it's not country, we're good.
Oh, it's country.
Oh, country's going to happen.
It's happening, dude.
So I talked about it previously, but it's a product of the generation that this was recorded.
Mm-hmm.
The microphones couldn't handle the dynamic range of some of the instruments, which was one of my not necessarily bigger because I didn't catch it until I actually really started listening to the album, but one of my main things, because there's not a lot to dislike about this, honestly, to me, except for the fact that it's way too smart for me and I don't understand it. My biggest complaint is, why are they lying and saying that the last two songs are two different takes? Because they're exactly the same.
I could not hear a difference. I didn't go through it with a fine-tooth comb, but they sound the same.
You know what's really hilarious about that is, like, we both say that, but I guarantee you there's some jazz nerds out there.
Yeah,
they know exactly where the nuance difference is on it.
That's my beef about it, too, is some of the recording is, like, not holding up to how loud the shit is.
Yeah.
And it sounds shrill.
Yeah, exactly.
And it like kind of hurts my ears a little bit, and I have to like turn the volume down but it's like 1957. There's like no bass.
Yeah, it's like the old days when they just sung into a fucking big giant megaphone, and then the needle fucking etched the record for them.
But like you're saying, there's not much to dislike about it, but at the same time, it's like,
I don't understand it.
To me, there's not a deeper like emotional there's not a whole lot going on here that like makes me like be like, wow, that was amazing. It's good, I like it, but at the same time it's not blowing me away. Like
it's not tugging at your soul.
Like Miles Davis Sketches of Spain is an album that's I'm close to, you know what I mean? And it's deep.
Is that based off the fact that because it's just musical?
No.
Okay.
I love instrumental stuff all the time.
That's my issue with it.
So I like jazz that's more challenging and like more going on. It's pleasant to listen to. I would absolutely like if someone's like, you like Lee Morgan, 100%. I do.
Yeah.
It just doesn't play well as an album. I love Lee Morgan, but it doesn't. That's my only beef about it.
What would you rate it then?
I give it a 3.3 out of 5. I think it's good, but there's not enough going on here to like keep my attention where I'm like, I have to have Lee Morgan Volume 3. It's a good listen. You put on another Lee Morgan album, I'm probably just as good as that one. So I'm a Lee Morgan fan. I'm glad you helped us discover it. It's good. 3.3 for me. Casey, Lee Morgan, Volume 3.
Close. No cigar for me. 2.9 out of 5.
Mhm.
I think it's a decent album. I just don't understand it. And I think it comes from this is kind of my introduction to jazz. Like I said, my most jazzy is Trioscapes. So this is kind of a introduction to jazz to me.
I have a story about this after this, but I'm not going to say it here.
I like the concept of it. I feel the style of music misses so much when it's not live. I feel like you have to have that live, that feeling at the time, you know? And I feel like just on album, it misses so much of that nuance of the, like, being in the scene at the time. I think had I listened to this,
you're listening to something you missed out on.
Exactly. I think if I was to go to a bar and listen to any of these songs being played live, even by some other random person, it would be 100% better than what it is on the album. And I think that's just I get
what you guys are saying.
Side effect of the jazz scene to me. I always associated jazz with spontaneity, and this just isn't spontaneous enough for me.
Even though it's recorded.
It is, but it just
decades ago.
Yeah, decades ago, live music sounded like recorded music.
Nathan, your pick, Lee Morgan, Volume 3.
I give it a 4.0 for I Remember Clifford alone. I think it's a great track. Mm-hmm. I agree with you guys. I understand where you guys are coming from. But also at the same time, I love that I am hearing that mic. I love that I'm hearing these things because it is a product of its time. And I love history. I want it to sound old. I want to hear the gears moving. Mm-hmm. This is a good record. There's better records and better recordings by him, and he's got an awesome story. So if you get a chance, check out Lee Morgan.
Doesn't he have a documentary?
There was a documentary that came
leading
out
up to his death or whatever. And
yes,
we're not even going to touch on it here, but yeah.
There's a documentary on Netflix that you can go and check out. So that was Lee Morgan, Volume 3. This is Blenderstyle. Thanks for watching.
Like, subscribe, and go fuck yourself.
Send us dick pics. Welcome to Blenderstyle, where three metalheads talk about something they know nothing about.